even at that young age, you're going to have more shy kids. You're going to have more outgoing kids. Figuring out, within the family unit as well as in a classroom setting, recognizing each of these kids or each of my kids is going to approach life very differently.
Susan, lifestyle plays a significant role in Adlerian psychology, and could you elaborate on how individuals can navigate the cards that they're dealt with in life and utilize them to foster growth and movement and just find purpose and resilience?
So Adler's concept of lifestyle is very different. Usually when people hear that term, they think like lifestyles of the rich and famous, something like that. And we have to remember that, Adler's ideas, he originally was writing and developing them in German. And so the translation from German to English, sometimes things aren't as clear as we would hope. And another example of that is, and this just popped into my head, when Adler was writing, he was really looking at the individuum. So the Latin term individuum as a holistic thing that you can't divide it up, which again, you got to remember he was writing and developing his theory at the same time as Freud, who was all about, breaking people up into id and ego and superego and kind of having these very distinct aspects of oneself. And Adler was like, no, that's not it at all. We got to look at the whole picture, the whole person. And so that's where the Latin individuum comes into play. That got translated to individual, right? So individual psychology is another term for Adlerian psychology. So our journal, the Journal of Individual Psychology, is still the Adlerian Psychology Journal, but that's where the individual psychology term comes in. So we have some issues with translation. So lifestyle, Adler was talking about like a game plan for living. It's one's unique view of self and others and the world and how we go about moving through our lives, right? So now if I kind of bring us back to the hand idea, our lifestyle, the way that we approach work and friendships and intimacy and self and spirituality is going to have that unique perspective woven through it. So lifestyle, Adler said, was the culmination of early childhood experiences. So everything related to the family influences the development of this perspective. Another term that is synonymous with lifestyle is personality. Some people, the neo-Adlerians, we're not going to call them neo-Freudians, but the neo-Adlerians would say that's ego, that conscious awareness of self and really paying attention to, why we think and feel and act the way we do gets at lifestyle. I use several metaphors kind of when I talk to people about lifestyle. So you mentioned, the cards that were dealt. One of the assessment tools that I use is the Basis A inventory, and that is an objective lifestyle assessment. So it's uniquely Adlerian. It produces scores on really 9 scales. It's 10 scales total, but 9 scales that kind of have unique understanding. And so as I think about lifestyle and the cards somebody is dealt in life, and then you got to figure out how you're going to play them, this can be a good metaphor for lifestyle. So we think about genes and hereditary, aspects of ourselves. That comes into play in these cards. Our families, most of the time we don't get to choose who our families are. We're kind of born into a family structure, a culture, right? And so all of that stuff influences and determines what these cards ultimately look like. And so then we get to play these cards across our life. And the more awareness we have about the cards we hold in our hand, as well as how do we typically use them? How do we typically play them? And does that work for us or not? That's some of the deeper understanding about lifestyle. Another metaphor for it is it's like your thumbprint. You take it with you. You put your stamp on pretty much everything you do in life. And it's only unique to you, right? So we know that nobody has the same thumbprint, fingerprints as anybody else in the world. And so that's another way of understanding lifestyle is each of us has that unique perspective. And even twins, even identical twins, born seconds apart, are still going to have different perspectives on life in some pretty significant areas, simply because one was born first, right? And so then If you think about these two being raised together, it's like, oh, well, yeah, he came out first and she came out second, right? So there's always going to be some early childhood experiences, family stuff, birth order, influences how our lifestyles develop. Adler really talked about psychology of use and movement. So it's not that we have these cards or we have these genetic things or we have this family. It's what do we make of it all? How does that influence the way that we think? How do we then take that and move and try to figure out, again, the world of work, friendships, intimate partnerships, self, and spirituality?
Wow. Fascinating. And I appreciate, I'm hoping by the end of this podcast, I will know which finger to use for which concept and master it. Definitely learning so much from this conversation.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Adler emphasized the purposefulness of behavior. How can understanding this principle help parents and teachers or caregivers help support children and individuals in a personal and professional manner? So what I mean is at home, in schools, how can we support our young ones?
So if we start first with Adler's understanding of purposefulness of behavior, he would say that, again, in just talking about lifestyle, right, each of us has a unique way that we view situations and interactions. That lifestyle starts forming, from infancy, and then we can really start to see it come out and kids start to, test different parts of their lifestyle, different parts of their personality, particularly as they get into the school age years, so that, pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, and so on, up until about fifth grade or so is when Adler would say, lifestyle is forming. So that whole early elementary school time frame, kids are trying to figure themselves out, trying to figure out how is life going to go for me? As they're interacting with new people beyond the family unit, they try out, well, this worked at home to get my needs met. So I wonder if it'll work here in the classroom, or if I wonder if it'll work with, the friends that I'm sitting with at lunch. And not that any of this is conscious in that way for kids. It's that's me as an adult kind of putting words to that thinking in that process. Purposefulness of behavior is, again, kind of getting at the heart of why do we do what we do? When you go to put on shoes and socks, do you do one sock on one foot, one sock on the other, and then a shoe, and then the other shoe? Or do you do sock, shoe, sock, shoe? Different people have different ways of doing it. Until somebody makes them stop and think about it, it might be like, I don't know. Maybe that's my mom did it. Maybe that's just, kind of who knows? So that's really kind of what we're trying to help figure out, right? So parents and teachers and things like that, if you're looking at a kid and trying to figure out why are they doing this, it makes sense to them, but it doesn't make sense to me. And that's another kind of component of purposefulness of behavior is this concept of private logic. Private logic most of the time flies in the face of common sense. And so again, what makes sense to one person may not make any sense to another person. That's why we call it private logic. It's unique to us. So kids are going to try to figure out how to fit in and belong, how to contribute, how to, get noticed and get their needs met, at home, in school, in friendships, and so on. And so if we've noticed and start to get curious, and that's what I've encouraged teachers and parents to do, is to stay curious about why does that behavior make sense to that kid in this situation? It also helps us, kind of sidestep any, frustration, anger, upset emotions that might come about as we watch that behavior. So that's a key thing for parents is to stay curious rather than get overly emotional about whatever that behavior is. Rudolf Dreikurs was a colleague of Alfred Adler, and he really kept Adlerian psychology alive in the U.S. after Adler's death. He was based in Chicago and working with what today we now know as social workers. So he and his wife, T. Dreikurs, were living in Hull House there in Chicago. And so really Adlerian psychology is the undercurrent of social work. He started really writing about and wrote a very famous book called Children the Challenge with Vicky Soltz that talks about how do we help kids really understand why they're doing what they're doing. He developed what we now know as the 4 misguided goals of behavior. you can Google it and you'll see four goals of misbehavior. But I think Dreikers would take issue with that and say, all behavior serves a purpose. It's not necessarily misbehavior, although we might, as adults, put that label on it. It's just misguided because the kid is just trying to get a need met. And if we can understand what need it is they're trying to meet, then we can help them figure out more useful and more pro-social ways of getting that need met in order. So from the least amount of discouragement to the most. So if we take a kid who wants mom's attention, right? So let's picture this kid's maybe 4, and all of a sudden the phone rings and mom goes to answer the phone. And the kid was hoping that mom would play a game with them. So mom goes to answer the phone. So this kid's feeling a little discouraged because, the time that he thought he was going to have with mom, now mom's on the phone. So mom answers the phone, and this kid, because they're already feeling somewhat discouraged about attention, they might use attention-seeking kinds of behaviors to try to get that need met, right? That need of connection and love that mom was getting ready to show by playing a game. A child who is engaging in the goal of attention is probably going to do something like tugging on mom's pant leg, skirt, arm, leg, something like, trying to get mom's attention. And the way that we as parents or adults can know that it's attention-seeking behavior that's being used in this situation is how we feel. If we're annoyed by this behavior, chances are it's attention-seeking behavior. So let's say that mom doesn't respond because mom's still on the phone. It's an important phone call, and she's doing her best to try to ignore the attention-seeking behavior and hope that the kid gets the message. Well, some kids might just go off and play by themselves. Other kids are not going to stop because they really wanted that sense of belonging, kind of whatever they're hoping would come to them as a result of playing with mom. So now this kid is more discouraged. And so they might then go to a power play. Attention and power, the kind of the first and then the second goals of misguided behavior. So a kid who's using power to try to get their need met might do something like throw a tantrum on the floor, right? So it's no longer, I want your attention. It's, I'm going to demand your attention. And here's how I'm going to demand your attention, right? So now they're pitching a fit on the floor, carrying on, just, being a mess. And the parent then would know, okay, this is now power my kid is using to try to get their need met because I'm angry, right? So whenever we're caught in a power struggle, right? So think about adults. I mean, we as adults use these for misguided ways to try to get needs met too. So when you're stuck in a power struggle, you're usually going to feel angry. That's the power goal. Now, let's say that, mom, in an effort to, again, try to, finish the phone call and not reinforce the power struggle, might say something like, I will be with you as soon as I am done. Something that acknowledges, I see you, I see that you need me, but we're not going to do it this way. So let's say then that, mom's still on the phone and kid gets even more discouraged. And now they go into revenge mode, right? So attention was first, then power. Now we're at revenge. That could look like a kid screaming, I hate you, or you don't love me, or kicking mom in the shin, or doing something to try to hurt mom. And the reason, again, kind of the purposefulness of this behavior is that kid is probably feeling, I'm hurt. You've ignored me, you ignored my tantrum, you didn't, help me meet my need. And so now I'm going to hurt you because I'm hurt, right? Again, a kid can't vocalize that, so it comes out in their behavior. So a parent or a teacher would know, we've now moved to revenge mode because now you feel that hurt. You feel that sense of hurt. So that's the revenge mode. And then let's say, mom's not giving in, mom's still on the phone, is trying to see this call through. The most discouraged level of behavior that a child might exhibit is what's called withdrawal or a display of inadequacy. Mm-hmm. And so this is a kid who just gives up, who just walks away and gives up. The way that as a parent or an adult that you're dealing with a kid who's given up is you feel that sense of hopeless and like you have to do it for them. And so again, this is, from least discouraged to most discouraged, but let's not lose sight of the fact that children have learned in various interactions what works for them. So even the most discouraged child seems hopeless isn't really hopeless. So they're using that misguided behavior to try to get their need met. That was a lot of information.
Yes, and it explains that this is their way of saying, without all the words we use as adults, is I need something. Like you said, I don't have my needs met. Help me to gain that significance. I don't feel belonging right now.
Right? Yes. And that's what it all comes back to. If parents and teachers can do many, many things to foster belonging at home and in the classroom, they're less likely to see the most discouraged behaviors because kids will feel it. The other thing, though, that we forget as adults is, kids are still figuring themselves out at this point. So it may be that you've got kids that just experiment with power and revenge mode behaviors, recognizing how you respond to that can either, help them develop more pro-social, pro-belonging ways of getting their needs met, or it can reinforce bad behavior, quote unquote. Again, recognizing that kids are highly intuitive, and even though they may not understand the why, I'm doing it because, I'm doing this because, we as adults can recognize, there's a reason behind this behavior. There's a reason we're seeing this. Even at that young age, you're going to have more shy kids. You're going to have more outgoing kids. Figuring out, within the family unit as well as in a classroom setting, recognizing each of these kids or each of my kids is going to approach life very differently. I'm not going to have all extroverted kids in my class, or I'm not going to have all extroverted kids in my house. So do I offer ways of belonging and contribution that meet that, right? So a shyer kid may still want to contribute, but they're not going to want to, organize, their peers in something. They might want to organize papers, something they can do on their own. So we got to remember that too, is that, not everybody is going to have the same personality. And so are we offering ways of belonging and contribution that meet a variety of, of potential personalities that are forming?
If you like the content of this video, please don't forget to follow. And also, if you want more information, visit the website, Yogi Patel, TTE.com.